I've lived at number 12 for almost 8 years, right next to the Millers. From the outside, they seemed like your typical suburban family. 2 parents, 2 daughters, a manicured lawn, and the occasional barbecue in the backyard. If anything, I just thought they were a little loud. But over the past few months, I started noticing something odd. Their living room light stayed on long after midnight, sometimes until dawn. And more often than not, I'd catch sight of someone, always the younger daughter, sleeping on their couch instead of in her bedroom. At first, I brushed it off. Teenagers fight with their parents all the time. Maybe it was just a phase. Then came that night. It was close to 1 a.m., and I was in my kitchen making tea when I heard it. Sharp, sudden, and unmistakable. The sound of glass shattering. Everything went silent for a split second, and then I heard muffled voices, low but tense. I peeked through the blinds, figuring maybe someone had dropped a dish. Instead, I froze. The girl, Emma, was sitting on the couch, clutching the side of her face. Even from my window, I could see the blood running down her chin, bright under the harsh lamplight. Standing over her was her father, gripping the jagged base of what used to be a drinking glass. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't apologizing. He looked angry, like she'd done something to deserve it. That was the first moment I realized the Millers weren't just a little loud. Something inside that house was very, very wrong. I'd seen plenty of arguments from my front porch, but that night was different. After the glass hit her face, I half expected Linda, her mom, to rush over, maybe even yell at Mike for losing his temper. But she didn't. She stood there in the middle of the living room, arms folded across her chest, wearing this smug little smile that made my stomach turn. From halfway up the stairs came the sound of laughter. Not nervous laughter, not the kind that slips out when you're uncomfortable. This was sharp, deliberate. Emily's laugh had a way of carrying through the house, and that night it cut through the silence like a blade. She leaned against the banister, phone in hand, recording just enough to make the moment a joke for later. And the worst part? Mike and Linda didn't seem to mind. In fact, they almost looked pleased to have an audience. That's when it clicked for me. This wasn't an outburst. This was a routine. A family dynamic where cruelty wasn't hidden, it was showcased. And in a neighborhood where most disputes stayed behind closed doors, the number 14 house treated theirs like a private sport. I didn't know yet how deep it went, but I knew one thing for sure. Whatever story they'd tell about what I'd just witnessed, it wasn't going to be the truth. A couple of days later, I spotted her again, this time at the small grocery store down on Maple Street. She worked the afternoon shift, usually stocking shelves or running the register. That day, she had a strip of white medical tape stretching across her cheekbone, the kind you pick up from the drugstore when you don't have access to proper first aid. Her movements were stiff, like every step reminded her of something she was trying hard to forget. When I reached her lane, I tried small talk. Nothing heavy, just a neighbor checking in. "Rough weekend?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. She gave me a half smile, the kind you give when you're trying to close a door before anyone can peek inside. "Just clumsy," she said. "Tripped over my own feet." But the way her hands shook when she scanned a can of soup told a different story. Her eyes darted to the clock above the service desk, like she was counting the minutes until she could leave. I paid for my groceries, but I didn't walk out right away. I lingered by the newspaper rack, watching her help the next customer with the same tight smile. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was the feeling you get when you've seen the start of a fire and know it's only a matter of time before the whole place catches. From that day on, I started paying closer attention. Not because I wanted gossip, but because I knew, just like with that night in the living room, that the story she told me wasn't the real one. And sooner or later, the truth had a way of showing itself. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind where most of the neighborhood was either mowing lawns or watching a game inside. I was out back, trimming the hedges along the property line, when I caught a familiar voice drifting through the warm air. Emily. Her tone wasn't the fake sweet one she used at block parties. She was laughing, really laughing, into her phone, telling someone about a prank she'd pulled on her little sister. Only I knew what she was calling a prank was the same thing I'd watched play out in their living room days earlier. And I got it on video, she bragged. You should have seen her face. I mean, yeah, she was bleeding a little, but come on, it's hilarious. My stomach turned. Then I noticed her bedroom window on the second floor was cracked open, just enough for sound, and maybe something else, to slip through. I stepped closer to the hedge, careful not to make noise, and tilted my head up. She was holding her phone out to show the person on the call. I couldn't see the screen perfectly, but I saw enough. A still image of her sister with that same strip of tape on her face, looking caught between pain and humiliation. I pulled out my own phone. This was the part where any reasonable person might have walked away, but I didn't. I zoomed in, snapped a few shots, making sure to get her face in frame along with whatever was on her screen. If she spotted me, I could be accused of snooping, or worse. But my hands stayed steady. The sound of my heartbeat was louder than the hedge trimmer lying idle at my feet. When she finally turned away from the window, I slipped my phone back into my pocket like nothing had happened. Those photos weren't proof enough on their own. But they were a start, and I had a feeling I was going to need every single piece I could get my hands on. It was late, close to 11, when I cut through the side street on my way home. Most houses were dark, porch lights off, the neighborhood settling in for the night. But number 14's porch light was on, casting a pale glow over the front steps. That's when I saw her, sitting on the top step, knees pulled up, arms wrapped tight around them. Her eyes were red and puffy, the way they get after hours of holding it in. I slowed down, pretending to check my phone, then walked up just far enough to hand her the bottle of water I had in my bag. "Hey," I said softly. "You doing all right?" She looked at me for a second, like she was weighing whether answering honestly was even worth it. Then she reached out and took the bottle, her fingers cold against mine. I was about to say something, anything, to let her know she wasn't invisible, when a voice thundered from inside. "Who's out there?" Mike's voice. Sharp, suspicious. My pulse jumped. I stepped back toward the sidewalk and called out, "Just me, Mike. Sorry, wasn't sure what time it was." There was a pause, then a curt, "Get on home," before the screen door creaked. In that split second before I turned away, she reached out and gripped my hand. Not hard, just enough for me to feel it. A silent message. I didn't need words to understand. She knew I'd seen more than they wanted me to see, and I knew she understood I wasn't just another neighbor pretending nothing was wrong. I walked the rest of the way home with that thought buzzing in my head, along with the sinking feeling that the line between watching and getting involved had just gotten thinner. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. I'd stopped by the grocery store for milk, and she was at the register, bagging groceries for an elderly couple. Her voice was quiet, but I caught a fragment as I walked past. "Yeah, they're having people over Sunday. Dad says they're important." I didn't interrupt. I just paid, thanked her, and left. But that sentence stuck. The Harpers didn't host people unless there was something to gain. If important guests were coming, it meant they'd be on their best behavior, which was exactly when the truth needed to come out. Back at home, I scrolled through my phone and found the contact I'd been sitting on for weeks. Dan Harris, the store manager. He'd been side-eyeing her injuries since day one, but never had proof. I called him, kept my voice low. "You were right. I've got pictures, audio, even some video." 10 minutes later, I was at the store's back office, sliding my phone across the desk. Dan leaned in, scrolling through still shots of Emily holding her phone up with that cruel grin. The audio clips of Mike and Linda bragging about keeping her in line. He didn't need convincing. "If you're serious about this," he said, "we can make sure the right people see it. And I know a couple of folks who'd like to return the favor to your neighbors." We came up with a plan. Dan would come to the party, uninvited, under the pretense of dropping something off. He'd bring 2 others, people who'd heard enough over the years to know this wasn't a misunderstanding. All we needed to do was wait for Sunday, and make sure the truth walked through their front door before anyone had a chance to hide it. By Sunday evening, the Harper's place looked like something out of a home decor magazine. Lights on in every room, fresh flowers on the dining table, the good silverware set out. Through the open windows, I could smell coffee brewing and some overly sweet dessert cooling on the counter. Dan pulled up right on time, with Mrs. Wallace in the passenger seat. She was the type who noticed everything and remembered it. We didn't knock. We just walked in, casual as you please, like we belonged there. Maybe you clicked here out of curiosity, or maybe, without even realizing, you were looking for a quiet place where words arrive slowly and the silence is part of the conversation. I wrote this story with care, stitching together memories, hurts, and small discoveries, hoping that somewhere in it, you might see a piece of yourself. If that happens, even for just a moment, stay, listen as far as you can, and if you feel like it, leave a small sign, a simple "I'm here" in the comments, a quiet share with someone who needs it, or a gentle tap on the like or subscribe button. It doesn't have to be big. Sometimes the smallest gestures are the ones that last. Didn't know how much light cost until it went missing. The eye doctor's office smelled like hand soap and paper. There were posters of eyeballs on the wall, all the parts labeled with tiny arrows, cornea, lens, retina, like a treasure map that didn't lead anywhere fun. The doctor used a voice people use with kids who might cry. He pointed at a number on the computer and said words I didn't really know. Out of network, deductible, copay, estimate. Then he said the number out loud. It sounded bigger than my whole first grade class. Mom sat down like her legs forgot what to do. She squeezed my hand, just once, and said, "We'll figure it out." She always said that when things were not figured out. I could see the doctor's mouth move, but one eye makes everything feel like someone turned the world sideways. The bright light made little fireworks in the corner of my good eye. He showed us a picture of a round gray cloud inside my bad one. He said a surgery could help me see better, maybe even read signs across the street without guessing. I thought about the red stop sign at the end of our block and how it always looked like a tomato. On the ride home, Mom didn't turn on the radio. She drove with both hands on the wheel, 10 and 2, like my teacher said was safest. At a red light, she tilted the mirror down and looked at me. She smiled, the soft kind she uses when I'm sick. "We'll figure it out," she said again. "Promise." After the doctor, money became a weather report in our house. I could feel it in the air even if I didn't understand the forecast. Dinners changed first. We used to have spaghetti with meatballs on Fridays, and I got to help roll the meat into little planets. The meatballs stopped happening. Fridays turned into noodles with butter and the green shaker cheese that makes a tiny dust cloud. Mom started telling me she'd already eaten at work, But sometimes, I saw her cut her piece of toast in half and slide the bigger half onto my plate when she thought I wasn't looking. Bedtime changed too. Mom used to sit with me and read Dogman until my eyes got heavy. Now she'd kiss my forehead and say she had a few emails, then wash the kitchen floor, then fold laundry, then just check something on her phone. I could hear the washing machine hum through the wall long after the neighborhood got quiet. When I woke up for water, the living room light would still be on. Mom staring at her budget notebook like it was a puzzle with missing pieces. There were new words in the house, the grown-up kind. Payment plan, consult, wait list, second opinion. Mom said them softly into her phone like she didn't want the walls to hear. She kept the volume low when she was on hold, but I could still hear the music that sounds like the inside of an elevator. Sometimes she'd stare at the calendar and whisper dates to herself, as if the boxes could move around if she asked nicely. One afternoon, Mom opened her jewelry box. It was white with a little ballerina that didn't spin anymore. She took out her wedding ring. I knew that ring. It made a circle of light on the wall when the sun hit it just right. She turned it around on her finger without putting it back on. For a minute, she looked like she was listening to something only she could hear. "Hey, buddy," she said. "Yeah?" "You know how we say we keep only what we need?" I nodded, even though I didn't remember saying that out loud before. "This," she held up the ring, "we don't need." "Okay," I said, "because I'm 6, and when you're 6, you don't really own anything except your backpack and your dinosaur socks." We drove to a store that had a bell on the door and glass cases with lights. The man behind the counter wore a vest and tiny glasses that made his eyes look like a goldfish. Mom placed the ring on a little black pillow. The man lifted it with 2 fingers, like it might run away. He peered through a round glass and said numbers and letters like a secret code. When we got back in the car, Mom's hand looked different on the steering wheel, like the sunbeam had been erased. She blew out a breath and smiled at me, but it was the kind of smile that doesn't go all the way to your eyes. Mike was mid-story, holding court with a beer in one hand, telling a group of 3 guests about how running a tight ship at home made everything else run smoother. Linda hovered nearby, topping off wine glasses, nodding at all the right beats. Emily sat on the couch, legs crossed, scrolling through her phone like she wasn't listening. But I knew she always was. Dan didn't waste time. He stepped right into the middle of the living room, pulled out his phone, and tapped the screen. Mike's own voice filled the space. "Lucky I didn't break her whole damn face." Then Linda's laugh followed, clear and sharp. "A little pain teaches the weak where they belong." The room went dead quiet. Before anyone could recover, Mrs. Wallace walked over to the TV, plugged in an HDMI cable from her phone, and hit play. The screen lit up with still shots and short clips. Emily filming her sister's injury, smirking into the lens, captioning it with things like, "Drama queen can't handle a little joke." One of the guests, a woman in a red blazer, turned to Emily. "Oh my God, is this real?" Emily's face drained. She lunged for the remote, but Dan stepped in, blocking her. Linda tried to laugh it off, something about kids being kids and inside jokes. But her voice wobbled. Mike didn't say a word, just clenched his jaw and stared at the floor like he could make the moment vanish if he didn't move. You could feel the shift in the room. They weren't the hosts anymore. They were defendants, and everyone else had just turned jury. The silence didn't last long. A man in a pressed button-down, someone Mike had clearly been trying to impress, set his drink down hard enough to make the ice jump. "So this is how you run a tight ship, Mike? By smashing glass into your kid's face?" Mike opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Across the room, a guest in a navy suit shook his head slowly. "We've been sitting here thinking you were this model family. We've been lied to." He stood, grabbed his half-empty glass, and tossed the contents onto the coffee table. The liquid splashed across Linda's neat stack of magazines. Emily's phone buzzed non-stop in her lap. Every time she looked at the screen, her face paled a little more. Her friends were seeing the videos in real time, and then it started. The first calls. Mike's phone lit up. Work. He silenced it. Then Linda's phone rang. Church committee. She turned her back to the room, voice low, but the tension in her shoulders gave her away. Mrs. Wallace caught my eye from across the room and gave a barely there nod. We didn't need to say it. This was moving beyond the walls of number 14 faster than they could stop it. Mike sat down heavily in his recliner, elbows on his knees, palms pressed to his forehead. Linda disappeared into the kitchen, the clatter of cabinets covering whatever she muttered under her breath. Emily curled into the corner of the couch, phone pressed to her ear, whispering to someone who clearly wasn't giving her the comfort she wanted. The perfect family veneer had cracked in front of their most valuable allies, and there was no putting it back together. The storm I'd felt brewing for weeks had finally broken, right here in their spotless living room. A few weeks later, a bright red "For Sale, Price to Move" sign showed up in the Harper's front yard. The grass had gone a little too long, and the flowers Linda used to fuss over were browning at the edges. Word around town traveled faster than any realtor's pitch. Mike had been let go from his contracting job. Officially, it was budget cuts. Unofficially, people said the videos had made the rounds at the office. Linda stopped showing up at church. The women on the hospitality committee had seen enough, and heard enough, to make it clear she wasn't welcome in their circle anymore. Emily? She'd gone quiet on social media, but not before half her so-called friends shared those same videos with captions that weren't so different from the ones she'd once written about her sister. The difference was, now the joke was on her. And then there was her, the girl at the center of it all. I saw her on a mild Tuesday morning, stepping out of the house with a single rolling suitcase. Her hair was pulled back, the scar still faintly visible on her cheek. But her posture was different, shoulders squared, chin level. She paused at the curb, looking back at the house. Not at me, not at the neighborhood, just at that 2-story monument to everything she'd survived. Then she smiled, small, private, the kind of smile you give yourself when you've made it out. I didn't wave. I didn't need to. Some endings don't come with applause or clean resolutions. Sometimes, the most satisfying ending is watching the curtain fall and knowing the people who once thrived on cruelty are now left alone in the empty theater they built for themselves.